It started with a spit, not a slip of the tongue, not an offhand insult, an actual wad of spit, landing squarely on Richard Nelson's cheek in the middle of a police precinct. The man who did it was laughing. So were the half-dozen officers. Leaning against the wall, sipping coffee like they were watching a comedy sketch instead of an act that would change the entire future of their department. What they didn't know, what would make some of them turn pale minutes later, was that Richard Nelson wasn't just some random guy who wandered in off the street. By the end of the hour, the man they had mocked, humiliated, and disrespected would be their new boss. The air hung thick with August humidity in Blue Ridge, North Carolina, the kind of morning where the sun hadn't even fully broken the horizon, but sweat was already forming on the back of your neck. Richard Nelson sat in the driver's seat of a weathered Ford sedan, engine idling quietly in the parking lot of the Blue Ridge Police Department. He had been appointed chief of police just 8 days earlier. His resume was intimidating: 22 years in law enforcement, multiple commendations, a master's degree in criminal justice. But titles didn't matter to him today. Not yet. Today he wasn't coming in as Chief Nelson. He was just Richard, a tall, broad-shouldered black man in faded jeans, a plaid shirt, and scuffed work boots. His badge and uniform were locked away in the glove box. He wanted to see the department as it really was, unfiltered by ceremony or performance. There had been rumors, whispers of a toxic culture, casual racism, officers who treated their badge like a shield from consequences. Richard had seen it before in other towns, and he knew that until you peeled back the curtain, the truth stayed hidden. That's why he was here early, without an announcement. He cut the engine, stepped out into the heavy air, and walked toward the side entrance. He kept his head down, observing. In the parking lot, officers stood in small clusters sipping coffee, trading jokes in low voices. A few gave him quick, dismissive glances, the kind people give to someone they've already decided isn't worth their time. Inside, the fluorescent lights buzzed faintly overhead. The air smelled of burnt coffee and copier toner. Phones rang somewhere in the background. Officers were huddled over desks, typing reports, laughing about something. One of them had said. Richard moved slowly, scanning faces, noting interactions. So far, no one recognized him, just as he planned. Then came the voice. "Hey, you." It was sharp, cutting through the hum of the room. Richard turned to see a tall white officer with close-cropped blonde hair walking toward him. His nameplate: Reed Daniels. His stride was confident, almost cocky, like a man used to owning the space around him. Daniels stopped a few feet away, looked Richard up and down, and smirked. "You lost? This ain't the shelter." A couple of other officers, leaning against the wall behind him, chuckled. Richard stayed calm. "No, I'm just—" Daniels cut him off, voice louder now so everyone could hear. "You need to take that mess somewhere else. This is a police station. We don't need people like you hanging around." Laughter bubbled up from the group. Richard's pulse quickened, but he kept his expression neutral. "People like me?" he asked, voice low. Daniels took a step closer. His breath smelled faintly of coffee and spearmint gum. "You heard me." Then, without warning, he leaned forward and spat, a warm, disgusting hit of saliva landing on Richard's cheek. The laughter behind Daniels erupted into open cackling. One officer slapped his knee. Another muttered, "Teach him his place." Richard froze. The saliva slid down his skin like an insult made physical. His instincts screamed to react, but he had come here to observe, to learn. Slowly, deliberately, he reached into his pocket and pulled out a neatly folded white handkerchief. He wiped his face, eyes locked on Daniels the whole time. "Is this how you treat everyone who walks through those doors?" he asked quietly. Daniels smirked. "Only the ones who don't belong here." Richard didn't answer. He turned away, walking down the hallway toward the main offices. Behind him, the laughter faded, replaced by the ringing of a desk phone. Minutes later, the intercom crackled. "All personnel, report to the briefing room." The briefing room was packed. Officers filled the chairs, lined the walls, coffee cups in hand. The air buzzed with casual conversation. Daniels was there too, leaning against the back wall. Still riding the high of his earlier performance, at the front stood Captain Harris, a heavy-set man with a graying mustache. He tapped the microphone. "All right, quiet down. We've got an important introduction today." The room settled. As most of you know, Chief Caldwell retired last month. We've been waiting for his replacement. Today, I'm pleased to introduce our new Chief of Police, a man with over 2 decades of experience, a record of reform, and a commitment to integrity. Please welcome Chief Richard Nelson. Every head turned toward the side door as Richard stepped in. The room went silent. Daniel's smirk vanished. Color drained from his face. The officers who had laughed earlier shifted uneasily in their seats. Richard walked to the podium, placing a folder with the precinct seal on it. He scanned the room slowly, meeting the eyes of each officer. His gaze lingered on Daniels for a moment longer than necessary. "Good morning," Richard began, voice steady. "As you've just heard, my name is Richard Nelson. As of today, I am your new Chief of Police." The silence deepened. "I came in plain clothes this morning because I wanted to see this department without the formality of introductions. I wanted to see you, the real you." His tone sharpened. "What I saw was unacceptable." A murmur swept through the room. "This morning," Richard continued, "I was insulted, spat on, and laughed at. And not one of you stepped in to stop it." Daniel stared at the floor, beads of sweat forming at his hairline. Richard's eyes swept the room again. "Respect is not optional. It is the foundation of our work. Without it, we fail, each other and the community we serve." He stepped out from behind the podium. "Some of you laughed because you thought you were watching a powerless man being put in his place. But let me be very clear. Everyone who walks through those doors deserves dignity, whether they're wearing a badge or not." He stopped in front of Daniels. "Officer Daniels, when you spat on me, you disrespected not just me, but the badge you wear and the oath you swore. You didn't care to know who I was because you assumed I didn't matter. That assumption is exactly why this department has lost the trust of its community." Daniels swallowed hard. "Chief, that's enough," Richard cut in. "Effective immediately, you are suspended pending an internal investigation." Gasps rippled through the room. This is not a slap on the wrist. This is the first step in rebuilding a department that has lost its way. If you can't rise to the standard, you won't serve here. He returned to the podium, letting his words hang heavy in the air. "I'm here to set a tone, integrity, respect, accountability. Those aren't just words on a poster. They're how we will operate. Change will be hard. Some of you will hate it. Some of you won't last. But if you stay, you will uphold those values every single day." No one spoke. Dismissed. The weeks that followed were tense. Daniels tried to appeal his suspension, but the investigation uncovered a history of complaints, excessive force, inappropriate comments, intimidation of younger officers. His appeal was denied. Some officers kept their distance from Richard. Others began to quietly shift their behavior. Officer Reyes, a young Latina recruit, approached him in the hallway one afternoon. "I should have said something that morning," she admitted. "I didn't because I was scared of Daniels. But I want to do better. That's all I ask," Richard told her. "It starts with you." Richard began walking the halls daily, stopping to talk with officers, checking in on cases. He organized training on bias, de-escalation, and community engagement. Attendance was mandatory. Some officers rolled their eyes. Others took notes. The community noticed small changes. Citizens who had once avoided the station began showing up for neighborhood meetings. Local business owners started greeting officers. On the street again. One Saturday, at a back-to-school event, a young black boy approached Richard shyly. "Are you really the chief?" he asked. "I am," Richard said with a smile. "My dad says the police don't care about people like us." Richard knelt to meet the boy's eyes. "I can't change the past," he said gently, "but I can. Promise we're working to do better. And if you ever need help, you come find me, okay?" The boy nodded, a small smile tugging at his lips. By the end of his first year, Richard knew the department wasn't perfect, but the culture was shifting. The laughter in the halls was different now, not mean-spirited, not at someone's expense. Officers who couldn't adapt had moved on. Those who remained were beginning to take pride in treating people with dignity. One evening, as officers filed out after their shifts, Richard stood in the main hallway and watched. For the first time since arriving in Blue Ridge, he felt something he hadn't dared to feel before. Hope. Change was slow. It was exhausting, but it was worth every fight.